Hi everyone, my name is Anna at Migrant Dr. Mom, and thank you so much for finding time yet again to join me today on this video as I talk about how to ace your interview. If you're a new subscriber, welcome. Thanks for joining the fam. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for your ongoing support, for all the all the inboxes, all the messages. I actually read all of them, and I'm grateful that you can find time to join me. So I thought I should cover this topic because it's quite a vital topic, especially for anybody that's looking for a job, wherever place you are. At some point, whether you're doing an entry-level job or whether you're doing a high-end job or whatever part you are in your career, there'll always be a time when you'll be called upon to do an interview. And essentially for me, an interview is very key because I find that it's the only time you have and a chance that you've got to show the interviewers that you really are the right person for the job. It's a time for you to show your qualification and skills and just to present yourself so that people know who is behind all the paperwork that they may have received. And don't get me wrong, your CV plays a big role, your selection criteria plays another big role, and obviously those two documents are quite key. They will hopefully enable you to get shortlisted and be invited for an interview. It's always an exciting time, yet nerve-wracking time, because obviously that's when your nerves are playing up. That's when the anxiety sets in. But I mean, if you are well prepared for your interview, I think you'll still be able to ace it. So obviously, before you're given an opportunity to come even for the interview, I would have supposed you would have done your market reviews, you would have determined your course profile, you would have gotten the skills that you need for the job, and be obviously the right person for the job. I mean, you need to be having the skills that are required, the qualifications that are required. There was a meme that I saw, when you write on your CV that you can speak French, you need to be able to speak French. And if you can move, a grader or something like that, you should still be able to have those skills to do that. So today's topic is essentially to give you a few tips that I have used myself, but also that I have done a bit of research on all the important, platforms that are usually preparing people for job readiness. And I'll just, we'll go through it together so that, you get a bit of tips and what to do when eventually it's your time for the interview. So the biggest thing or the first thing that you would have done is research your potential employer. I remember when I was invited for my first interview, those of you who've watched my other videos, you will well remember that I said when my time for the interview came, I'd missed my email, and obviously then I ended up doing my interview a little bit unprepared, obviously just after a shower, not really prepared, not dressed up, but fortunately for me, it was a phone interview. So obviously you still have to put on, your courage and just forge through. But one thing that I hadn't prepared really well for that interview, and it's because, part of it is because I'm a procrastinator, but also, also I didn't realize that I was going to have that interview that morning. So one important thing to always remember is you need to research your potential employer. And someone may be wondering, how do I research my potential employer? Check their website, check their digital platforms, including Facebook. And also the website will give you a bit of an idea about what are the mission statement, what is the vision of the company, what are the values of the company. And so that when you're asked a question regarding the mission and the vision, like I remember in my case, they did ask me, what's the mission of this hospital and how will you align yourself to be able to function as an RMO in this hospital. So if you don't know the mission statement of the hospital, it will be very, very difficult for you to be able to answer that question well. And remember, it's the opening question for the interview. So if you're not well prepared for that question, obviously it will set the tone for the rest of the interview. So very, very important to look at the mission statement of the company, to look at the vision and know the values of the company that you're working for. That's not only for the interview purposes, but also to know if it is in line with the values that you hold. Values like empathy, values like justice, values like, compassion, service provision and stuff like that. All those are things that may actually, be there for the company, and things that you may be called upon to give a specific example. So knowing those, or knowing that before your interview, prepares you really well to be able, to confidently speak about, I will, in the past I have done this and this and this, I've made a change in this and this, and that is, to back up, the fact that I'm a compassionate person, very empathetic, I'm a listener, I go, outside my, my norm, or outside, going far above what is expected of you to make sure that you are meeting the values of the company. So very important. The social media of the company is also good, because also it just opens up to know what sort of company are you joining, what sort of a people are you joining, and to know whether they are in agreement with what you believe in. So if you're somebody that is really pro, community involvement, somebody that is pro fostering the mental health, some, about multiculturalism and stuff like that. Those are the things that you'll be able to see on the digital platforms for this, the company that you may be joining. So very, very important to do your research. The other thing that is quite important to research, even as you go into the interview, apart from the nature of the company, is you always have to research about the salary scales of that company. Because the reason why I always say this is some of the people may actually ask you a question directly about your salary. What are you expecting? What are your expectations? And that is the time that then you will know. If you know the range of the salary is between this and this, you may actually have the potential to quote a higher value and back it up with, look, my experience goes, is quite extensive. I've done this in the past. I'm adding value to the company by doing this and this and this. So I believe, I would be, eligible to get, this amount of money. Not knowing what is being offered, you may just end up, throwing in a crazy sort of, answer that may just, take you off. So very, very important to research, know some of the, the topics that are likely to be asked, and also just generally have an idea of what you're getting yourself into. Very important. The second thing is you need to review the job description, because part of your interview, the opening questions may actually be very chilled, try and put you, relax you. They may just ask you, tell us about yourself, tell us about, how, like already what I've covered. But then, it's important to know the job description of what you are interviewing for. I'll give you a simple example. Like, for example, if you're interviewing for a junior doctor's job, or let's say a nurse, or even say a social worker, you need to be able to understand the job description for what you're getting yourself into. By knowing what is expected of you, like, for example, if they ask you a question, tell us about how your qualifications will fit in with a job, that's the time for you to sort of, the job description of a junior doctor is, ward rounds, procedures, paperwork, communication with colleagues, both written and verbal and stuff like that. That's the time that you come in and say, look, my day to day, I am competent in cannulations. I can do this. I can do this. I can manage an acute patient. I can do this. That's the time for you, without knowing what is expected of you on a job. Let's say you are going to be, like a packer, in a factory. It's very important to know what a packer does, because what you may think may not be what is actually, job described. So very, very important to know, the job description, what it will entail. Will you be talking to clients? Will you be making phone calls? And then that will give you an opportunity to describe your qualifications and your skills, what you've achieved in the past, to be able, to link it up with the required job description. So very important to study the keywords, very important to study the keywords about the skills, the experiences, and plan how you're going to answer those questions. Because one thing may be, the keywords may be things, participation or competencies. Others may just be, if good enough, like a junior doctor, nobody's expecting you to be able to do the big surgeries, but the ability to know that you've observed one, or you've been involved in one, or something like that, like a big, like let's say a cord blow or an emergency situation, nobody's expecting you to run the med call, nobody will. But then just the ability to be able to say, look, at the med call, I'll be able to check the results quickly, run the samples down, do this and this and this, very important to know what is expected of you in that time, in terms of your scope of practice, to be able to answer appropriately and to prepare your answers in advance. The other thing is, obviously, that I find helpful to enable you ace an interview is practice answering questions. I find this very key, because sometimes whatever you think you know, you may not be able to express it. And sometimes we all have blind spots. We may not be able to know that every time we talk, this is how our body language is. Because remember, an interview will give you an opportunity, especially the face-to-face ones, will give you an opportunity to be able to talk about something, but also the non-verbals are going to be expressed. So very important at that point in time to get a colleague or somebody else who's going to just listen in to what you're talking about, and preferably somebody that's a little bit senior than yourself, somebody that that has gone through the process, somebody that may know what is expected of you. And then just that person will pose questions to you and probably, like, for example, ask you, in the case you had this happen, how will you address it? For example, patient presenting with palpitations, how are you going to manage such a patient? Or, you are in a job situation, you're a receptionist, a client comes in and they're breathing fire, they are upset. How are you going to manage this? Okay, remember, you may not have encountered such a scenario, so you may not really know what to do, but the ability to practice such a situation, with somebody that has either gone through it, or somebody that's more senior than yourself, or somebody that is a bit knowledgeable in that area, will give you the ability to practice the answering that question. And if you don't do well, then they will give you feedback so that you know how to go about it. And then you will come up with a structure on whichever question comes. However difficult it is, you find a structure in which you'll be able to answer those questions. So focus usually your answers, focus them on the job description and on the specific company you're working for, and what is expected of you in terms of skill set. So very important to not just say, look, I will, like, I like to use, my background, like in medicine. If you're a junior medical doctor, you're going to press the cord blue button. And as soon as your seniors come in, you're going to give a handover and you're going to, take a role. You're not going to lead that med call, You're going to be able, like, to give, provide additional support as part of the team. Okay, so very important to gear your answers, practice them with your friend, practice them with somebody that can give you honest feedback so that you can work at improving yourself, remembering that we all have blind spots. The next thing that's quite important is you need to understand the STAR method. Okay, the STAR method of answering questions may actually, it's usually geared towards, remember, most of the questions that you'll be asked will be behavioral questions or situational questions. And most of the time people will ask you, how will you, what will you do in this scenario? How are you going to respond? So those are like behavioral sort of, or situational types of questions that they are going to ask you. So a best way to do it is the STAR approach, where STAR is, you mention the situation, you mention what your task was, you mention what your action was, and then you mention what your response was. Like, for example, if they ask you, how can you tell us about, your sort of communication skills or something like that. So you sort of say, I had a situation in which a relative was very upset about how, we were managing the patient. So you clearly state the situation that happened, okay? And then you say what your task was. In this situation, my task was to speak to, the next of kin about, what we had done so far up to that level, okay? And then the action was they were not happy with you, So, they were not happy with the whole situation. So the action that I took was I was able to print out the results, sit down with them, talk to them, explain, and I did actually get a senior to come in and speak to them. And the response was they were happy with the situation. And instead of putting in a complaint about the department, that complaint was, lifted. So your interviewers will actually be able to know that you're somebody that can manage a conflict. There's somebody that can confidently talk about a situation and obviously how you managed it. And that way they can actually see that you know what you're talking about. So very important to try and use the STAR approach most of the time and be able to address the questions asked. The next thing is that I find helpful when you're preparing for your interview is you need adequate rest and pick your outfit before. So I would always say, the nerves will make you want to keep preparing until the very last minute, for your interview. But I find the best thing is to try and get adequate rest, get a good sleep the night before, prepare your clothing for the next day. And it's always good to know what type of, clothing you're going to wear. It's always good to pick out, like depending on the company, obviously, that you're going to work with. If you're going into a high-end, like a lawyer job or whatever it is, you will have already done your research about the company. You will have already known what sort of, attire they prefer. And you will prepare yourself for the interview based on that. Like, for example, in the medical field here in Australia, nobody really expects you to wear, a suit or anything like that. But wearing a smart casual where you're smartly dressed, preferably, my preference, this is just a personal preference, is, casually, obviously dressed with, stud earrings, with my hair really nicely done, and, and you put on your nice smile. That's probably good enough to see yourself acing an interview. It not only, shows that you are actually serious about the job, but it also gives you a bit of confidence knowing that you are appropriately dressed, you're happy with how you're dressed, and that's, will give you confidence. You're not looking over your shoulder, look, oh, my sleeves are short, I don't feel comfortable in this. You feel that confidence that you have knowing that you've dressed appropriately for the role, and you will just, that's one of the things to tick off, the list of things to worry about is appropriately dressing yourself. And then remember, even as you prepare yourself, body language is quite key in an interview. People will not only see what you're talking about or hear what you're talking about, people will also see what you're talking about. So very important to remember your non-verbals, your body language. One thing, I don't say this is something that you should all do, but one thing I find is I always give eye contact, proper eye contact to whoever I'm talking to, even as I go across, if somebody else asks me a question, I turn my body towards them, give them eye contact as I respond, talk to them with, giving my examples and trying to be confident about it all. In the past, anytime I've met, someone new, I would, I still do that official handshake if there's an opportunity to do that. If they're sitting around a table, then obviously it's hard. It would just be nice to say hi, nice to meet you, and I'm glad you could find time to interview me or something like that. So your non-verbals will form, a big part of your interview. Okay. So like I said, part of the things that will give you confidence is, knowing what your job descriptions, understanding them really well, appropriately dressing for the part, and also, just looking at the website to be sure what you're going to dress in. And then obviously, using the non-verbals to the best of your ability. And obviously, I don't expect you to show up for your interview in creased clothes or give it the seriousness it requires. It's a job that you're after, so you want to give proper first impressions even before you open your mouth. People need to be able to see that you are actually prepared for this role and you are glad to be there as well. The next thing is there's always this thing that I've found in Australia where you are asked, the interviewer will give you an opportunity to ask them a question. I think for my first interview, because I was really not prepared for it, I, I mumbled a little bit there because I was like, oh, why are they asking me to ask them a question? But I knew that I had to, sort of say something. So at that point in time, I can't even remember what I came up with, but it's always good to prepare yourself. And I must say, I'm better now because I had a recent, phone interview, and at least I had some questions to ask my interviewer about, a few things here and there. So they expect you to ask them something, and so don't leave that bit uncovered. One simple way to ask, I find this question very easy to ask. Or if I was, if I joined the group, or if I joined the company, what would be your expectations of me in the next 100 days, or in the next, or for my first term, or for the first month? Or if it is like a sales or retail job, you would probably say, what are your expectations for the first quarter, or something like that. So always have something that you're going to ask, or probably ask, what's the culture? What would you say is the best, culture, or what's the culture of this place in terms of this and this and this? So for example, in terms of, looking out for the employees, needs and stuff like that. So give them an opportunity to say something that will, help you as well know what the culture of the place is and what is expected of you when you get the job. What's the other thing? And then obviously, one other good question to ask is, what are some of the challenges that you've seen people in this job? Like, let's say if it's a resident medical officer job, you'll say, what are some of the challenges that you've seen IMG doctors face in the first year of their employment? So it's just gives an opportunity for them to know that you're thinking about these things, you're thinking about how to better yourself if you get the role, and gives you an opportunity to, show your interviewers that you actually are serious about the opportunity that's ahead of you. The other thing that I find very important is follow up after your interview. I have always had or felt quite an important thing. It may look like, I don't want to say silly, but I would like to say it is something worthwhile doing, and that is, following up after your interview. One thing that I've easily found, like I say, thank you for taking the time to interview me for this role. Just say something like, thank you so much for interviewing me for this role. I would really be glad if I was given an opportunity to work with you guys. And, kind regards, Anna. It doesn't need to be detailed. Oh, my interview went like this. I felt like this, like this. And even in times where I have not actually gotten a good response, most of the time, even in the past, and you guys know my story, I've always followed it up with an email to say, thank you so much for taking the time to start my paperwork. It's unfortunate that this time around it did not work out, but in future, if an opportunity arises, I would be very much appreciated if I could be part of the team. And that way, it just shows, the interviewers that you are quite serious again about the opportunity of working for this institution. And it's also just good manners to appreciate people for taking their time to interview you. I know it's their sort of their job to do that, but that's it won't take you too much of your time. So that's something that I've always found myself doing, and I think I was going through somewhere, I think it was Indeed or something, that was actually recommending that send an interview after, send an email after your interview. And as I finalize, I'm just going to rush through, just list some of the additional tips that I have found helpful. that I would highly recommend is when you're going for your interview, visualize success. I know they may have told you it's so hard to get a job in that company, or they never employ people from this part of the world, or they never employ people with part one exams and stuff like that. But when you go in, visualize success. You've been given an opportunity. Just being shortlisted and being invited for an interview is a big deal, So show up like somebody who's going to be successful and carry yourself as somebody who's going to be victorious. Regardless of what happens, regardless of not being able to answer the first question appropriately, you still have time to actually show that you're potentially the right candidate for the job, and obviously give it your best. Confidence is key, okay? Obviously, I don't expect you to be overconfident and, trivial and stuff like that, but really know your stuff. And the little that you know, if your strength is communication, then dwell on that strength, okay? Do not dwell on your weaknesses and what you haven't done right in the past. Dwell on the strengths that you have, because those are the things that are going to, to bring out who you are, and to show them that you are the best candidate for the job. The other quick thing is, I always say, prepare yourself, have something to eat, not too much, just enough. You don't want to be in an interview and the stomach is growling. You don't. Seriously, you don't want to be in an interview and your stomach is growling and making noises. That will not only eat on your confidence, but it will also, it's just inappropriate for people to be nicely quiet and, guess what? And things happening in your tummy. You don't want that happening, okay? Number 3 is obviously I find it helpful to bring a notebook. I always go for the few interviews I've gone to, I've always carried a notebook. I know people say that you can use your phone, but I still would recommend a pen and paper, or a pen and a book. And that way you're not asking, if they ask you a question, like if you have 3 sets of questions to be asked, you're not going back to ask, what was your second question again? Can you tell me what pardon? No, you probably write your questions down, and that way you prepare yourself and you're thinking about it even as you go from question 1 to question 2 and question 3. Very important to write that down. And it will also give you an opportunity, remember when you go for an interview, the nerves and all that make you forget things. But if you've written out, a little, something about the question that you'd like to ask them, that's the time that you can actually now check and say, look, this is the one question that I did have that I wanted us to talk about. And then I cannot reinforce enough eye contact, eye contact, eye contact, eye contact. If you're speaking to somebody, the best thing is to look them. I'm not saying to, what's the English word? I forget. I'm not saying you stare at them, give people eye contact. You can swing your eyes from interviewer to interviewer, but it's very important to look somebody, preferably in the left eye, look at them and say, look, this is, and express yourself about what you want to talk about. And then, what's that? Okay. Prepare and gather your documents. You may need, a copy of your, something that you may have forgotten. Have your reference, if they ask you for references, or, letter of recommendations that you may not have submitted, or something like that. Or if they ask to visualize your original documents, have them handy to go, have them ready to go, that you can just say, look, this is, if they ask, can you show us this? You have it ready to go. Can you show us this? You have it ready to go. You don't want to say, look, I will send it again. Have them handy and good to go and ready to go, okay? And then finally, the most important thing, if you forget everything else, just be authentic, be you. There's not anybody that's going to be you. There's no one that's going to have the strengths that you have. And, you are the person that knows yourself best. You know your strengths. You know your weaknesses. You know what you're bringing on the table. So own it. Own it and speak about it without fear. I know of people who are, are extremely good, but they don't want to speak about their successes. They don't want to speak about what changes they have brought in their workplaces. They want people to speak for them. But remember, in an interview, before you get an opportunity for your references to say something good about you, you need to have actually convinced the people that are sitting in front of you. So be authentic. Speak about, your successes. Speak about your achievements. Speak about your skills and own them, because they are your skills, okay? Do not be afraid, to come out and convince the people that you're talking to that you're the right person for the job. So as I conclude, I know you've got this. If you have the skills and you have the qualifications that are needed for the job, go forth, apply for it, prepare for it, and own it in your mind. See it and actually visualize it happening, and it will happen. All the best, even as you prepare for your next interview. Thank you. God bless.